She wasn't supposed to survive, but she did. And that's when the real nightmare began. Her name was Maya, 26 years old. She lived in a small southern town where everyone knew your name but not your truth. By day, she worked for the Whitfields, one of the wealthiest white families in the county. They had owned half the land for generations, their name carved into the pillars of the courthouse, their money woven into every corner, store, school, and church. Maya worked in their home, cooking meals, folding laundry, and tending to children who would grow up believing they owned the world. It wasn't slavery. Not anymore. But the shadows of history clung to the walls of that house. And for Maya, survival meant swallowing her pride, because the paycheck kept the lights on in her mother's small house across town. On the surface, the Whitfields were kind. They smiled, said thank you, even offered her leftovers from the dinner table. But behind their politeness was the unspoken truth that she was not equal. She was tolerated, not celebrated, respected in words but not in heart. In that house, her footsteps were too loud, her presence too sharp, her silence too heavy. She knew it. She felt it every day. But Maya had dreams bigger than laundry baskets and polished silverware. She was saving to leave, to go to Atlanta, to build a life where she wouldn't always feel watched, judged, or silenced. But someone else was watching her. Not the Whitfields, not their neighbors. Someone far more dangerous. It began with small things. A note left on her car windshield with no name, just the words, "I see you." At first, she thought it was a cruel prank. Maybe one of the teenagers in town playing games. But then came the flowers left on her doorstep. Always fresh. Always the kind she liked. No card. No explanation. She asked her friends if they knew anything, but they laughed it off, saying maybe she finally had an admirer. Her mother told her to pray about it. Her boss told her to focus on work. Nobody took her seriously. But Maya felt it in her bones. This wasn't admiration. It was surveillance. And she was right. One evening, after finishing late at the Whitfield home, Maya began her walk back to the bus stop. The streets were quiet, only the sound of cicadas echoing through the night. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. Steady, slow, matching her pace. She turned, but the street looked empty. Still, her heart raced. She quickened her step, and so did the footsteps. She ran, and for the first time, she saw him. A man, tall, pale, with a face that seemed too calm for the darkness he carried. He didn't say a word, just smiled. Maya ran harder, ducking into the light of a convenience store, her chest heaving, her hands trembling. When she turned back, he was gone. She told the cashier what she saw, but he only shrugged. In towns like this, Black women's fear was often dismissed as exaggeration. People listened but didn't hear. From that night forward, Maya lived with the weight of eyes she couldn't see. She started noticing doors slightly ajar that she swore she had closed, windows unlatched when she remembered locking them, whispers in the wind that carried no source. And the Whitfield's house, the place she thought was safe, began to feel like a stage where she was being watched perform. The man wasn't a stranger to the community. His name was Daniel. To the Whitfields and their neighbors, he was just another friendly face. He mowed lawns, carried groceries, waved at the church parking lot. A polite white man with a soft smile. Nobody suspected the hunger behind it. But Maya saw it in his eyes that night. He wasn't interested in love. He was interested in possession. She tried to tell the Whitfields once. While folding sheets in the laundry room, she whispered to Mrs. Whitfield that a man had been following her, leaving notes. Mrs. Whitfield frowned, then offered her tea, as though fear could be soothed with sugar and porcelain cups. "You're imagining it," she said softly, the way people speak when they want your truth to go away. And in that moment, Maya realized she was alone. But being alone didn't mean being weak. The trap came one Friday night. Maya was leaving work later than usual. The Whitfields were hosting a dinner party, the kind with polished glasses and laughter that sounded more like performance than joy. Maya cleaned quietly, her body aching, her mind wandering to freedom. When she finally stepped out, the street was empty. The moon hung low, and that's when she saw it. Her car, the tires slashed, and behind her, a shadow. Daniel stepped forward, his smile wider this time, his voice calm. "I've been waiting for you." Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, But the street was too empty, the houses too far, the music from the Whitfield's home too loud to drown her terror. He moved closer, speaking as if they were old friends. "You don't belong to them. You don't belong to anyone but me." In that moment, Maya realized this wasn't just a stalker. This was a trap. He had been watching, waiting, studying her every move, and now he had cornered her. But survival is a language black women know too well, and Maya understood she couldn't freeze. She couldn't plead. She had to outthink him. She looked at him, steadying her breath, and forced her lips to curve into a faint smile. "Then take me where you want," she whispered. His eyes widened, surprised. Most would run, but she played into his delusion. He relaxed, and that was her opening. She stepped closer, then closer still, until her hand found the heavy flashlight she always carried in her bag. And with all her strength, she swung. The blow landed against his temple. He staggered back, cursing, clutching his head. She didn't wait. She ran. Through the streets, past the glowing windows, through the darkness. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs shook. She ran until she saw the small house where her mother lived. Light flickering in the window, she banged on the door, sobbing, screaming, "Mama, let me in!" Her mother pulled her inside, holding her as her body trembled. Maya tried to explain, but her words tangled in fear. All she could say was, "He's coming." And he did. Later that night, as they peered through the thin curtains, they saw him, standing across the street, watching, smiling. And just like that, the nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. Because the trap wasn't just one night. It was a game Daniel had been playing for months, and one he wasn't ready to lose. The days that followed were a blur of dread. Maya stopped sleeping. Every creak of the house felt like a footstep. Every shadow on the wall felt like him. She told neighbors, but they looked away. She told the Whitfields, but they told her to focus on work. She went to the bus stop and saw him across the street. She went to the market and felt his eyes on her. He was everywhere and nowhere, all at once. And then, one evening, he disappeared. For 3 days, she saw no sign of him. No notes, no flowers, no footsteps in the night. She thought maybe it was over. Maybe her fight had scared him away. She started to breathe again, to laugh again, to dream again. But on the 4th night, as she lay in bed, Maya heard it. The faint creak of a door inside her own house. And what happened next was something she would never forget. Because survival wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. So I ask you now, what would you have done in her place? Would you have run? Would you have fought? Or would you have frozen? Tell me in the comments. Because the next part of Maya's story will show you just how far a black woman can go when the world refuses to hear her. And what she didn't know was that someone else was still watching. Maya had just begun to believe the danger had passed. 3 nights of silence had felt like freedom. 3 nights without notes, without flowers, without that shadow across the street. She had dared to laugh with her mother again, dared to think about Atlanta again, dared to breathe. But survival has a cruel rhythm. It comes in waves, pulling you back under when you think you're safe. And on the 4th night, as Maya lay in bed with her mother asleep in the next room, the sound came. A creak. Not from outside, from inside. Her body froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The floorboards in her mother's old house always told the truth. Every step, every shift, every secret movement echoed through the wood. And this sound wasn't memory. It wasn't the house groaning under age. It was a footstep. She sat up slowly, straining her ears. Another step, then another. Someone was inside. Maya's mind raced. Her first thought was her mother still asleep, defenseless. Her second thought was Daniel. She didn't need to see him to know it was him. The silence was too heavy, the air too sharp. This was the moment he had been waiting for. She slipped out of bed, bare feet against the cool wooden floor. She moved like a shadow, her body trembling, her heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she knew if she ran blindly, she would lead him straight to her mother's room. So she crept forward, toward the living room, where the faint glow of the moon spilled through the window. And then she saw him, Daniel, standing in the center of the room, as if he owned it, his face calm, almost gentle, as though he were visiting an old friend. In his hand was something small, metallic, catching the moonlight. A knife. Maya's throat went dry. Daniel's voice was soft, almost affectionate. "You made me wait, Maya. You ran from me. That wasn't fair." Her hands shook, but she kept her voice steady. "Get out of this house." He tilted his head, smiling like a man who didn't understand the word no. "This house doesn't protect you. These walls don't protect you. You belong to me." For a moment, time stood still. The night air pressed against her skin, her pulse her body coiled. Survival had taught her lessons that went beyond fear. It had taught her observation, patience, cunning. She scanned the room, the fireplace, the iron poker leaning against the brick. It was old, heavy, but in her hands it could be a weapon, a shield, a declaration that she would not fall tonight. Daniel took another step, and Maya's instincts screamed. This was the moment. Either she acted, or she became another statistic, another silenced story. She lunged, grabbing the iron poker, swinging with every ounce of strength, the metal connecting with his shoulder with a sickening thud. He stumbled back, cursing, and the knife clattered to the floor. "Mama!" she screamed, voice raw, urgent. Her mother burst from the bedroom, eyes wide, horror etched into every line of her face. "Maya! What?" Daniel lunged for her again, but Maya was faster, stronger in that moment, fueled by fear and love and the need to survive. She swung the poker again, hitting his wrist, forcing him backward. The fight was desperate, messy, dangerous. Sweat mixed with tears, hearts racing in tandem, adrenaline screaming in their veins. Maya could end it now, finish him, but instinct and strategy pulled her back. There were witnesses outside. He could flee into the night, and she needed proof, a chance to escape fully. Headlights suddenly flooded the living room through the front windows. A neighbor's car. Daniel froze, eyes widening, realization flashing across his face. Without hesitation, he bolted, fleeing through the back door into the darkness, disappearing into the night like a phantom. Maya sank to the floor, knees weak, heart still hammering. Her mother pulled her close, whispering reassurances neither of them fully believed. Daniel was gone. Yet the house did not feel safe. It could not. Fear lingered, thicker than smoke, settling into every corner, shadow, and memory. Over the next week, Maya's life became a careful dance of vigilance. Every sound, every shadow, every unfamiliar footstep made her heart race. The mailman's routine delivery made her flinch. A dog barking 3 blocks away sent her sprinting to lock doors she had already locked. And always, in her mind, Daniel was there, just beyond her vision, waiting, calculating, plotting. Then the notes returned. Simple messages slipped under the door. "You'll be mine." 3 words, written in sharp, deliberate handwriting. Maya could feel the message as if it had landed on her skin, burning with threat. She did not open the note the first time. She stared at it, then flung it into the fireplace. Flames devoured paper and ink, but the threat remained etched into her mind. She considered calling the Whitfields. She considered calling the police. But who would believe her? A black woman, terrified, accusing a white man of stalking and threatening her? History and reality had taught her that people would look away, that the world would not bend for her fear. She had learned to survive by herself. One evening, after several days of constant vigilance, Maya noticed something she had missed before. A shadow moving across the neighbor's yard, a figure lingering near the edge of the street. Herr Stomachsang. Daniel was back, closer than ever, bolder than ever. Her escape route, the world outside her home, was no longer safe. He had learned, adapted, evolved his plan. He was no longer stalking from afar. He was preparing for a confrontation that would leave no room for error, no chance to hide. Maya realized then that survival was no longer enough. She needed strategy. She needed to predict his moves, to outthink him at every turn. Every step she took outside, every errand she ran, every corner she turned, became a calculated risk. She started keeping a bag ready by the door, small but weighted with essentials: pepper spray, a flashlight, spare clothes, a phone charged and hidden. She changed her routes, varied her schedule, made her presence unpredictable. Yet the emotional toll was devastating. Sleep became impossible. She could not relax, could not laugh freely. The Whitfield's polite ignorance had become a mirror of the world. Indifferent, dismissive, unwilling to confront the shadows that preyed on her life. Friends who asked how she was found her eyes distant, her smiles tight, her laughter hollow. Maya had become a soldier in her own home, fighting an enemy the world refused to acknowledge. Then came the night of the garden party. The Whitfields were hosting again, a lavish gathering with music, laughter, wine, and polished silverware. Maya worked quietly in the kitchen, preparing hors d'oeuvres, but her attention kept drifting to the shadows outside. And that's when she saw him, Daniel, across the street, watching through the trees, perfectly hidden in plain sight. His eyes locked on hers, for a heartbeat too long before he melted back into darkness. The threat was no longer abstract. It was immediate, unavoidable. Maya realized that Daniel's obsession was no longer about her physically. It was about control, dominance, and humiliation. He wanted to see her fear. He wanted to break her spirit, to prove to the world that she was powerless. But Maya had survived worse than fear. She had survived invisibility, the erasure of her pain, the constant reminder that her life was negotiable in the eyes of others, and she was not about to let him win. That night, she made a decision. She would confront the terror, not blindly, not recklessly, but with strategy, precision, and resolve. She would reclaim her life, piece by piece, block by block, heartbeat by heartbeat. She researched self-defense, mapped escape routes, and found allies who could protect her when the night became too dark. Every preparation sharpened her mind, honed her courage, and reminded her of her own strength. Weeks passed. Daniel's appearances became more daring, more taunting. He left notes on her car, scrawled messages in the sand near the park she jogged in, whispered from shadows as she walked the streets. But Maya was ready. Each time he tried to draw her out, she had already calculated the counters. Her survival became an art, a game of chess with her life as the stakes. And then, one night, the final trap revealed itself. Daniel cornered her in a deserted alley. His voice was calm, almost amused, as though this confrontation had been scripted from the beginning. "You can't run forever," he said. But Maya had anticipated this. The alley wasn't empty. Friends she had confided in weeks before, people she trusted, emerged from hidden corners. The ambush that Daniel believed would break her spirit, instead exposed his vulnerability. His plan unraveled before his eyes. Maya stepped forward, strong, unshaken, the weight of fear finally balanced by determination. "This ends tonight," she said, voice echoing off the brick walls. And for the first time, Daniel hesitated, confronted not with a victim, but with a black woman who refused to be erased. The confrontation ended not with blood, but with exposure. Daniel fled, but the community had seen him. The whispers that had ignored Maya's fear became murmurs of recognition. Her fight had forced the world to acknowledge her truth, even if just for a moment. And yet, even as Daniel vanished into the darkness, Maya understood that survival was not victory. He would return, as predators always do, and the next encounter would demand even more courage, even more cunning, even more resilience. So now I ask you, the audience, what would you do if you were Maya? Could you summon the strength to survive against someone who believed they owned you, who had plotted against you, who had stalked every move? Tell me in the comments. Because the next chapter of Maya's story will push her to the very edge of fear, courage, and the true meaning of survival. And as she walked home that night, she felt the faintest whisper of movement behind her. Someone was watching. The trap was not over. The nights had grown colder, sharper, more precise. Maya felt the weight of the stalking, the invisible gaze pressing on her every step, inescapable, relentless. Daniel had returned, more careful this time, more calculated. The previous months had taught him patience, and patience made him dangerous. But Maya had learned patience, too. She had transformed fear into strategy, terror into preparation, and uncertainty into control. Every step she took was deliberate, every breath measured, every heartbeat a drum of defiance. She began by analyzing his patterns. Where had he appeared before? Which streets did he favor? How did he blend into crowds, into shadows, into the normal rhythms of the town that had refused to see him for what he was? She documented everything. mapping every sighting in her journal with precision. Notes, sketches, times, locations, she turned observation into power. Power into a plan. Maya's home became a fortress. Locks reinforced, windows barred, alarms installed, escape routes calculated. She trained herself physically, running, lifting, practicing strikes with objects that could serve as weapons. Her mind became a weapon as sharp as her body, predicting moves before they were made, setting traps where none were visible, understanding that survival meant staying one step ahead. Even with all this preparation, fear never fully left her. It had transformed, not disappeared. She carried it like a coiled spring, tension and focus fused into a single force. But now she understood that fear could sharpen her senses instead of paralyzing them. She had to trust herself, trust the knowledge she had built through months of observation and confrontation. Then, one evening, as dusk settled like a heavy curtain over the town, she saw him, not in the shadows, not lurking. Daniel was out in the open, walking toward her neighborhood, deliberate, confident, a predator who believed his dominance was inevitable. But Maya was ready. She did not flee. She did not panic. She moved calmly, signaling to her allies, neighbors she had quietly brought into her plan. Everyone had roles. Every exit was covered. Every movement rehearsed. The confrontation began subtly. Daniel approached, smirk faint on his lips, eyes cold and calculating. "I thought you'd be hiding," he said, voice soft but loaded with menace. "I wondered how long it would take before you realized you couldn't escape." Maya's response was calm, deliberate. "I'm not hiding. I'm prepared." Her tone carried authority, a statement he had never heard before. He faltered slightly, as if the very calm of her voice unsettled him, challenged his expectation that fear would control her. He lunged suddenly, knife raised, and Maya's instincts kicked in. She sidestepped, pivoting gracefully, striking him with a steel bar she had concealed under her coat. The impact staggered him, but he recovered, eyes burning with rage. He attacked again, faster this time. But Maya was ready. She had anticipated his speed, his favored angle, his signature movement. Every strike she blocked, every maneuver she executed was the product of months of preparation, months of psychological warfare. The battle moved through the streets of the quiet neighborhood, unseen by most but watched closely by her allies. Shadows danced on walls, the rhythm of combat echoing through empty streets. Maya was not just defending herself, she was orchestrating a trap. Every step led him closer to the position she had prepared, closer to the moment where she could neutralize his advantage. And then, at the corner of the cul-de-sac, it happened. Daniel lunged one final time, and Maya pivoted, leading him directly into a net of her own making, neighbors, friends, allies hidden around the street, ready to intervene. Daniel stumbled, his movement trapped, and for the first time, fear touched him. He had underestimated her, and now the predator realized he had been caught in a web he did not see. Maya stepped forward, standing tall, breathing hard, muscles tense but controlled. "This ends now," she said, voice steady, eyes blazing. "You do not control me. You do not own me." The police arrived soon after, called by her allies before the confrontation escalated further. Daniel was forced to flee, retreating into shadows that would hide him temporarily but could not erase the exposure Maya had orchestrated. Cameras, witnesses, allies, he had miscalculated completely. The predator had been forced to recognize that she was not the same person he had hunted for months. She had evolved, adapted, and taken control of her narrative. Maya's mother embraced her, tears streaming down her face, pride and relief mingling with exhaustion. "You're safe now," she whispered. Maya nodded, but knew safety was temporary. She had learned the truth. The world would not always protect her, would not always see her fear, but she could protect herself. She could survive, she could fight, and she could reclaim her life. In the days that followed, Daniel's appearances became erratic, desperate. He no longer moved with the calculated patience of obsession, but with the frustration of one whose control had been stripped away. Maya used this, watching, documenting, setting small traps, observing his reactions. Every interaction reinforced the lesson she had learned. Vigilance, strategy, and courage were her strongest weapons. Her community began to see her in a new light. The neighbors who had once turned away in fear or indifference now recognized her strength, her determination, her refusal to be silenced. The Whitfields, too, could no longer ignore the reality they had been polite observers. But now even they had to acknowledge that Maya had faced a danger they would never have believed, and she had survived. And yet, the psychological toll was real. Maya could never fully relax. Every shadow, every unfamiliar step, every unexpected sound carried potential threat. But she had learned to transform that tension into preparation. Fear became her ally, focus her weapon, and courage her shield. Months passed. Maya moved forward with her life, slowly, deliberately. She secured a small apartment in Atlanta, still keeping connections to the community that had supported her. She began to work, save, and rebuild a sense of normalcy. But even as she planted roots in her new life, she remained vigilant. Daniel was not gone. He was still a shadow, still a threat. But he was no longer invincible. She had outsmarted him once, and now she knew she could do it again. And as the night stretched on, she realized the final lesson survival had taught her. Power is not about who strikes first or who holds the weapon. Power is about refusing to be erased, refusing to be silenced, refusing to live in fear when you have the strength to reclaim your life. Maya had learned that truth fully. So now, I ask you, the audience, could you imagine standing in her shoes, facing the predator who has studied your life, who has stalked you, who has sought to control every step you take, and still finding the courage to fight back? Tell me in the comments, because the next part of Maya's story will take us to the edge of fear, to the limits of survival, and to the moment where the ultimate confrontation could either free her forever or test her strength like never before. And as she looked out her apartment window that night, the city lights stretching like a constellation before her, she felt a presence, a shadow that moved just beyond the glow of street lamps. Someone was watching. Daniel had not gone. He was adapting, evolving, still determined, still waiting. But Maya was ready. The next encounter would not be about fear. It would be about power, strategy, and survival. Maya could feel it in her bones. The night air was heavier, thicker with anticipation than ever before. She knew Daniel's obsession had reached its peak. He had been patient, meticulous, careful for months, but his patience had begun to crack. There was a desperation in his patterns now, a recklessness in the shadows that followed her every step. And tonight, she was ready, not just to survive, not just to defend herself, but to end the nightmare once and for all. The city hummed softly around her small apartment. Streetlights flickered like distant stars. Cars moved past in slow, predictable rhythms. Maya had mapped everything meticulously, every alley, every back road, every place he might try to corner her. Her apartment was fortified, her escape routes planned, and her allies in place. Trusted friends, neighbors, even some local business owners who had begun to see her plight for what it was. She was not alone. Not anymore. She moved through her apartment like a tactician, checking locks, placing objects within reach, making sure everything was exactly as it should be. Her hands no longer trembled. Her mind was clear. The fear that had once controlled her had been transformed into focus, into strategy, into determination. Every step she had taken over the past months had led to this night. Then, almost as if summoned, the shadow appeared. Daniel lurking outside, his figure tense, his gaze sharp. He had underestimated her one last time. She did not flinch. She did not run. She watched, calm and steady, as he began his approach. "You can't hide forever," he whispered from the shadows, knife glinting faintly in the dim light. Maya stepped forward, her voice firm and unwavering. "I'm not hiding. And you're done." The confrontation began with the subtle precision of predators testing each other. Daniel lunged first, fast, violent. But Maya anticipated every movement. She sidestepped, deflected, and countered, guiding him exactly where she wanted. The streets were silent witnesses to their battle, empty and still, amplifying the tension with every echo of their movements. Months of preparation, observation, and psychological mastery had honed Maya into a force Daniel had not anticipated. She moved with the precision of someone who knew every pattern, every behavior, every weakness. She led him, step by step, into the exact trap she had set months ago. Allies hidden in the shadows were ready. Cameras she had discreetly placed recorded every angle. Every escape route she had mapped was available. Every contingency had been anticipated. Daniel, confident in his obsession, did not see the web closing around him. His strikes became reckless, his patience gone. Maya pressed her advantage, forcing him into a corner literally and metaphorically. She was the calm center, the eye of the storm, the one in control, and he was the chaos, blind to the strategy that had been shaping itself around him for months. Finally, at the alley that led to the city park, Maya made her move. She feigned a stumble, drawing Daniel in closer, closer to the waiting allies. The knife in his hand flashed, and she pivoted, catching him off balance. The allies emerged, surrounding him, voices firm, commands clear. Daniel faltered, realizing too late that he was trapped. "You're done," Maya said again, voice steady, resolute. "This ends tonight." Daniel tried to fight, but the numbers, the preparation, the exposure were overwhelming. He was forced down, disarmed, and contained. Maya stepped forward, finally confronting him face to face. The fear he had inflicted for months now reflected back at him. The predator who had thought he could control her life, her every move, her very breath, was powerless before her. "You underestimated me," she said. "You thought fear was your weapon, but I am not afraid. I survived. I fought. And now you will answer for what you tried to do." The police arrived shortly after, called by her allies in advance, and Daniel was taken into custody. Evidence: she had documented the notes, the surveillance. The careful mapping of his movements ensured there could be no denial, no excuse, no loophole. He was held accountable not just for the stalking, but for the terror, the obsession, the months of psychological torment he had inflicted. For the first time in months, Maya felt a weight lift from her chest. She had reclaimed her life, her home, her freedom. Justice had been served, not through fear, not through luck, not through the whims of strangers, but through her courage, her planning, her intelligence, and the support of the community that had finally seen her truth. The aftermath was quiet, deliberate. Maya returned to her apartment, inspecting every corner, every lock, every shadow. She walked through her neighborhood with a new sense of confidence, aware of the eyes that had once haunted her, now powerless to intimidate her. She rebuilt her routines, slowly, deliberately. She went out, she laughed, she lived. Fear no longer dictated her choices. She had survived and thrived, and she carried that truth with her in every step, every breath, every heartbeat. Her relationship with the Whitfields shifted subtly. No longer were their interactions superficial, polite, and indifferent. They recognized the woman who had faced true terror and emerged unbroken. Maya no longer sought validation from them, but their acknowledgement was a quiet affirmation that the world could see, even if it had often chosen not to. Maya also became a quiet advocate within her community, not as a figurehead or activist, but as a presence. Her story, her survival, her strategy became an example, a whisper of hope for those who had suffered in silence. She taught that vigilance, intelligence, courage, and the willingness to seek allies were as important as raw strength. That survival was not passive. It was deliberate. It was active. Months later, sitting by her apartment window, Maya reflected on the journey. The fear, the stalking, the isolation. It had shaped her, yes, but it had also strengthened her. Daniel had been caught. Justice had been served. And her life had returned to her in ways she had never imagined possible. The predator who had haunted her for so long was no longer a threat, no longer a shadow in the night. And yet, the lesson remained clear. Strength was not about being fearless. Strength was about S. It was a testament to every Black woman who had been ignored, silenced, or underestimated. It was a story of justice, strength, and triumph that could not be denied. So, I ask you, the audience, remember her story. Let it inspire you. Let it remind you that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. That survival is not passive, but deliberate. And that justice, when sought with courage and intelligence, can prevail. Maya survived. Justice was served. And the world would never forget the strength of the woman who refused to be broken.